Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And on this episode of the show, we're going to be discussing the Revenge of the Sith novelization that was written by Matt Stover. But before we get into the book, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media before we get started?
Absolutely. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, that is the line. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So once again, we're going to be talking about Matt Stover's novelization of Revenge of the Sith. Just if you, as a reminder, or if you didn't already know, Matt Stover was not a new author to Star Wars when he wrote the novelization. He had previously written Shatterpoint, which is the book about Mace Windu, and really created the Shatterpoint ability that Mace has. Traitor, which was set during the New Jedi Order and is on many people's list of best New Jedi Order books or best Legends book, period.
Mhm.
And Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mendor, which also gets a lot of acclaim, but was not one of my personal favorites. Had you read those books? I think you've read Traitor at least, but have you read the others?
Yeah, I've read Trader, and I know we've talked about reading Shatterpoint before, and I know so much about, Mace Windu and his Shatterpoints, especially after we just read the most recent Mace Windu novel. But yeah, I love Trader. And of course, New Jedi Order is very near and dear to my heart and always will be. And I know that this novelization is also considered, up there as far as one of the best Star Wars novelizations like of any movie. So,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of praise for Matt Stover, that's for sure, and well deserved.
Indeed. And having said that, what are your overall opinions of this novelization?
Oh, I thought it was great. I love reading this, and I know that I've alluded to it several times in our discussions as we've been going through breaking down the movie all year, and just the way that different scenes resonate with the book or vice versa. And I just think that the book really does a great job of diving into, as I like to call it, more of the psychological aspects of what's going on with each of the characters. There's some things that are, missing here and there as well that the movie definitely does a better job of, especially with the visualization of certain things. But as a whole, I love this novel, and I do think that it deserves the acclaim as being one of those novels that's, at the tippy top of all Star Wars. So what do you think?
I think it's really good. I enjoyed it
Mhm.
quite a bit. The last time I read it was probably 2005. There's just been a lot of other Star Wars stuff to read between now
Sure.
and then. And as much as I enjoy the novelization, typically if I'm going to enjoy Revenge of the Sith, I'm just going to watch the movie, right? It could be
Mhm.
done in 2 hours and 15 minutes, where it's probably going to take me considerably longer to get through this book. So I found it interesting when I was reading this time. I don't want to say I received it differently, but with the way Star Wars has evolved since 2005, there's things in this book that if this novelization had been written this year would be very different, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
For one, this novelization does rely on a lot of what is now Legends material for some of its references in there. For example, Anakin is thinking back to a lot of past battles in the Clone Wars, and he keeps referencing something that happened on J-Beam. I
Mhm.
think that's how he pronounced it. And that was a whole Clone Wars like comic that happened prior to Revenge of the Sith coming out. And the discussions of Shatterpoint were all things that were developed in that Shatterpoint novel that Matt Stover wrote. And then those are just a couple examples, but there's a lot of those in here. And there's references to the Labyrinth of Evil book that is a prequel to Revenge of the Sith in the sense that it takes place like literally days before Revenge of the Sith starts. And so it was just interesting to me in that regards, that it very much is, it's based on the movie, and so much of the stuff is the movie. There's a lot of alternative lines, which makes me wonder if this wasn't based off of an earlier draft of the script at some
Mm-hmm.
point, or if
Mm-hmm.
things just got changed during the course of filming on this. But again, it was written, like I said, it was written on reliance on a lot of what is now Legends material there. And so like I said, I just think it would be very different. I can't help but wonder, like, some of the stuff with Bail Organa right now, we've seen how he's been developed through Andor and Obi-Wan Kenobi in some of the recent work, the Mask of Fear book that Alexander Freed wrote. I think some of Bail's internal monologue would be different than it is in this book. So all this kind of say is that when it comes to what is canon and what is not now, the movies have always, of course, been held up as canon. And then they've always kind of said the novelizations, to the extent that they don't contradict the movies
Right.
there. And now I think they've kind of even gotten away from some of the stuff that's in the novelizations that doesn't necessarily contradict the movie. But since it wasn't in the movie, it's just kind of like, feel free to disregard it. But I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I agree because there's a certain lens that I feel like you have to read this book through. And I think you put it perfectly in that, because when this was written, as you said, there was a lot of Legends things that were still out there. And one of those that I caught as well is when Anakin is talking about the red lightsaber, and he talks about the synthetic crystal of,
Mm-hmm.
the lightsaber. And as we know now, that's a Legends thing. So I think that it's, you got to kind of take that with the lens, like I said, in which it's being provided through and when this was written. And I feel like I should know this, but is the newest edition of Revenge of the Sith, does it take any of those liberties to rewrite any of this stuff, or is it just basically the same book that's been presented in a new way? Do you know?
I don't believe they changed the text of the
Hmm.
book. I think it's been annotated in some
Okay.
places there.
Hmm.
And there's some additional, maybe some excerpts, some stuff from Matt Stover in the book, but I haven't picked that up. As we've discussed on previous episodes of the show, I'm happy with my first edition from
Right.
2005 on this, and it
Yes.
was fun pulling it off the shelf and reading through it on this. And as an aside, uh, you told me that Jonathan Davis did the audio version. I wish I had so known that. I would have
Yes.
downloaded that and enjoyed listening to that too. Because Mark, no disrespect to Mark Thompson, but Jonathan Davis is just one of my favorite audiobook narrators out there. I think he nails everything he does, that at least that I've listened to. And I may still have to do that. I've got some Audible credits. I may have to go ahead and just get that and listen to him do it.
Yeah, he's great. He really is. And there's
Mhm.
one other thing too that I noticed as because I was doing, speaking of the audio version, listening to the audio version in very fast speed while I was reading, but there was one reference that was made that I was like, wait, what did they just say? And it's towards the end when they're talking about it says in the book, the clones at Chance Palp
Mm-hmm.
seemed confused, and that's actually at the spaceport, but they call it Chance Palp in the book, which is the name of
Yeah.
the space book. And so when I was listening to it and reading it at the same time, I was like, wait a second, they just totally called that something different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's some of those things like the medical is called like the Chancellor Palpatine Emergency Medical Center. And then so like everything else in real life, it gets abbreviated down to like its first syllable. So it's like the Chance Palp M Sen or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, because that threw me too. The first time they said Chance Palp, I was like, what are we talking about here? And
Mhm.
everything is just getting named after Chancellor Palpatine. But
Right.
all right, fine. I guess it was actually the Emperor Palpatine Medical Center at that point, at the end of the book, where they take Anakin to put him in the new suit there. All
Palp.
right. Now that we've kind of got through some of our initial thoughts on this, I thought we'd just kind of take turns bringing up stuff from the book that stood out to us that we wanted to discuss. And yeah, just kind of address it for that way for a little bit. But so I'll let you lead off. What was something that you noticed in the book, or some aspect of the book, or a scene, or whatever that stood out to you that you want to talk about?
Well, like I said, one of my favorite aspects of this was the dive into the inner thoughts of the characters that you don't get to really see on screen because
Mhm.
obviously we're watching it from a third person perspective. So we get into this is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker, or this is what it means to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, or this is how it feels to be Mace Windu. So we get these little asides
Mhm.
that talk about their characters and their motivations just a little bit more. And I really, really appreciated that a lot, which I know for some people, actually, they said that that took them out of the story a little bit. But for me, it really added to it, I feel.
Yeah, what I liked about it was especially the portions with Anakin Skywalker
Hmm.
in this book. Some of the others I didn't need quite as much. They were helpful in understanding some of their motivations. In some regards, I feel like they've kind of gotten away from some of these characterizations. Now we were just saying, mentioning this about how I think this book would be different if it was written today compared to 20 years ago with the way the current canon is developed. But when it comes to Anakin, I'm just thinking of like how beat down he gets over the course of this book, like being pulled in all these different directions.
Yeah.
And there was one scene where he's in Palpatine's office, and he just is so internally frustrated because Palpatine is starting up about the Jedi again. And then he leaves there and he goes to visit Padme, and then she brings something up, and he's just like thinking in his head, it's like, can't everyone just like let me be? And just how tired, how frustrated he is. And as much as he loves his wife, and as much as he respects Palpatine is the person who looked out for him whenever he got there, and the brotherhood he has with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then both his loyalty and frustration with the Jedi and the things that he wants him to do, it's just like there's nowhere for him to go over the course of this book where there isn't some sort of a stress being put upon him.
Hmm.
And in some ways, I think it makes his fall even just that much more believable because we got those internal monologues.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And it also makes it, I don't want to say more empathetic because obviously the things that he did were so atrocious, but you can see how even when Palpatine is speaking to him, how it makes sense to him.
Yeah.
And you don't really get that on screen because all you see is just the effect of those
Uh-huh.
things.
Yeah. Well, and the way that Palpatine presents the case of the Sith versus the case of the Jedi,
Mhm.
having the book, there's more opportunity to get into those discussions. Whereas, you have to wrap it up in 60 seconds of screen time. In the movie, well, you can have 10 pages discussing in the book,
Sure.
and outlining how really this just similar the Jedi and the Sith are. They're just coming at it from two different angles. And so the Jedi are deluding you when they say that the Sith are bad because of this, but they're not for some other reason. And so when you see in the movie when Anakin says things like, I see through the lies of the Jedi, well, we had this discussion. It's like, what lies was he talking about? But now you can see how Palpatine really planted that idea in his mind so much clearly.
Mhm. Totally
The
agree.
other aspect with that was at the end of the book when it's the final one of those entries, like, this is what it feels like to be Anakin Skywalker forever. Is
Forever.
they change it right now to forever, and he's talking about, like, all along he's been thinking of this dragon inside of his chest that's been whispering things to him, like everything in the galaxy dies, even suns or whatever. When he's afraid for Padme, when he's afraid for Padme, the dragon's whispering to you, everything dies, even the suns and the stars and whatever the situation is. And but then at the end, it's like nothing made me do what I did. It was me who chose this. And he
Mhm.
went from thinking about Padme and doing everything for Padme, but once he had this power, he started doing everything for himself. And so later, when we start to think of like, what is it that fuels Anakin's hate? It's he hates himself for what he did and what he's
Yes.
become, and he hates Palpatine for driving him to it. But all at the end, the only thing he has to blame is himself. So I
And that
thought that was a spectacular portion of the book.
oh, yeah, me too. And that even makes that scene in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series hit home even that much more. Where when Anakin tells Obi-Wan, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did."
Yep.
And that's just, oh yeah, it all comes back to that. Really.
Yeah. Well, moving on a bit, because there's plenty of other things we want to talk about here in this book. One of the things that I really appreciated was the extra detail that highlights the conflict between the Jedi and Palpatine throughout this entire story. The key thing being that the Senate voted to put oversight of the Jedi directly with Chancellor Palpatine. And so when Palpatine pulls Anakin aside, and starts telling him, like, oh, you ever wonder why you haven't been on the council? I can make that happen. You'll see I have a way of getting things I want. And then he names Anakin as his personal representative of the council. There's no longer a question. It's like, how did he possibly have the authority to do that? Well, because he has
Right.
oversight of the Jedi. He has direct oversight of the Jedi on this. And then when the Jedi get around to asking Anakin, or telling Anakin, that they want him to spy on the Chancellor, it's because they've got this intel that actually comes from the Labyrinth of Evil book, that Darth Sidious is likely within Palpatine's inner circle. And so they are being very deliberately discussing amongst themselves, what if we did this? What if we said that? We could then, and we could see what Palpatine's reaction, and that might give us a clue. But they're sitting there like trying to figure out, is it Sly Moore that's Sidious? Is it Masameda? Who
Exactly.
is this Sith here? And so they're like laying all these traps and stuff, and they're actually contemplating. It's like, if this is true, if Sidious is in Palpatine's inner circle, just because the war ends doesn't mean that Palpatine's going to put down power. We need to be prepared to act. And so when there's these discussions, like, that Yoda saying, like, a very dark place this will take us, there's just a whole lot more to back that up. Here's my question for you: is like, it's great in the book. Do you think that would have worked in the movie?
I think if they did it right, and I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know exactly how to say that, but I think that there is probably a way that they could have at least alluded to that, even dropping it into certain conversations here and there. Because there's even, they say that they've traced them back to 500 Republica, so they know it's probably somebody in his inner circle, and they even entertain the idea that, well, what if it's even Palpatine? They're like,
Mhm.
well, he's already in charge. What would he need to be? Why would he be the Sith Lord? He's already in charge of everything.
Right.
So it's kind of like that makes more sense when you think about how everything spiraled, to be able to put some of those pieces of information in there. And I do think that they could have probably done that, like I said, even if it was just in passing or conversation, and it would have made so much more sense to how things did happen, as you pointed out from the Jedi oversight.
Mhm. Part of me, though, when I was thinking about this, is like, you'd almost have to turn this movie into a, like, 5 or 6 part Disney Plus series if we were going to include all this stuff in there, because the movie's what, already 2 hours and 15 minutes as it is, and we start adding a lot of these in-depth discussions, it's going to blow the size of the movie real quick. And so I can
Mhm.
understand why they were left out of the movie for pacing purposes. But one of the things that hit me the hardest was Obi-Wan is in there in the Jedi Council pleading on behalf of Anakin about, they're talking about how they're going to set Anakin up to spy on the Chancellor. They're going to give him a position on the council. They're not going to make him a master, and they're going to ask him to spy on the Chancellor. And Obi-Wan's like, but wait, I'm paraphrasing crazy here, but Obi-Wan's point is like, wait a second. We're all Jedi in this room. We were taken as children. We were raised here. We don't know any better. We don't form these type of attachments that Anakin has. He is so incredibly loyal that we're asking him to do something that's so against the nature of his being that I don't know. He'll never trust us again. And he makes that clear to the council here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the councils, and this is the one of the one places where the criticism of the council, I think, really rings true for me. I think a lot of times it's not deserved, but they're kind of like, no, he's a Jedi. He has a duty to, like, just get rid of his attachments and go
Yeah,
along with this.
exactly. They're just
And Owen's
treating him like a cookie cutter
right.
Jedi that, has had the same experiences as everybody else.
Yeah. But Obi-Wan's like, no, it does not work. And so visualizing what comes next. And it's not even, like I said, it's not even all the same dialogue. But afterwards, when Anakin is furious that he hasn't made a master, and he and Obi-Wan are talking about that hall, and then Obi-Wan's giving him this assignment, and he's telling it's not to be off record. In the movie, we see kind of like how distraught Obi-Wan is over this, because he argued against it. He argued in favor of Anakin so much, but we got to see it here in this book. So it's not us just taking Obi-Wan's word that he didn't
Right.
want to put Anakin in this position. He really did not want to put Anakin in this position.
Right, because he sees how, like as you said, Anakin's origins is so different, and he's loyal to people, not to principle necessarily. And he
Exactly.
brings that up. And, it makes me think, like you were saying, I know it was not in the best interest of time to be able to include all of these things, but it's unfortunate in a lot of ways that this movie was created before the advent of a lot of what happens nowadays with, and I'm just thinking of things like Harry Potter was split up, like the finale was split up
Yeah.
into two, and Avengers was split up, and even Twilight Breaking Dawn had part 1 and 2, and so that they could tell the full story. And you wonder if
That's
this
generous, Jay. It's so they can maximize the profits.
that too, but, so I'm just thinking of Revenge of the Sith, like, if we would have had things like some of the deleted scenes, and we've talked so many times, about several of them, and I don't wanna go off on a tangent too
Uh-huh.
far here from what we're talking about, but even the Delegation of 2000 and, some of those other deleted scenes that were taken out that would have just added so much more depth, and it's unfortunate that we didn't get those in scenes like this as well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And then you brought up another thing, the delegation of 2000 there. Uh, they show up in the novelization when they're absent from the movie. And again, that's something that's been handled a little bit differently in canon since this book came out, especially lately with what we've seen in Andor and the like, and
Mhm.
Mask of Fear by Alexander Freed. You can tell that book has had a lot of influence on us because we've referenced
Oh,
it so many times in the past couple months. But
so good.
yeah, they put that whole thing together. And I remember like the meeting at Padme's apartment, and they're getting into some dangerous territory. And I could visualize this like so clearly in my mind. Padme sits straight up, is like, "Has everyone had enough refreshment? Does anyone need anything else?"
More
And when
Hoy
everyone's
broth?
like, "Yeah," and then like when everyone says like, "No," she's like, "3PO, you can go, power down, go recharge." What she wants, like nothing, no other witnesses around, no one who can like C3PO can have a memory that can be accessed, and secrets pulled out and whatever. And she's like, she realizes what dangerous ground they're treading on with this. And sure enough, by the end of this book, Palpatine is telling Anakin that delegation of 2000 is not a list of senators, it's a list of traitors
Yeah.
in there. And Anakin basically is shielding Padme by virtue of his closeness with her. I mean, it's kind of like it's understood that you're with me, so you're safe. Everybody else, they got hell to pay.
Yes, so be careful who you associate with from here on out,
Mhm.
Padme. He even tells her that. But it also makes more sense, when we see that scene later on in Revenge of the Sith where after Obi-Wan had been there that morning, Anakin is kind of feeling and he's sensing that there was other people there, and he even catches the waft of the Hoy broth, and he's like, "Well, Obi-Wan's allergic to Hoy broth, and
Yep.
Padme hates it, so who has been here?" Those kinds of things. I just thought that was really cool. And while we're on the subject of it with Padme, that's another thing that I really loved about this book was that we do get so much more of Padme's perspective, and
Mhm.
we lost so much of that on screen because Padme had such a more strong inner voice. She had more even like political agency. She's
Yeah.
not just like crying all the time and sitting on her couch and sidelined, and you know what I mean? She's really involved in what's happening with them with democracy, and she's watching it die with her eyes wide open, with the whole delegate of 2000, and then her whole, tragedy between being torn between Anakin and her allegiances, and it's not just her heartbreak over Anakin, but over the Republic. And you don't get
Mhm.
that on screen
Mhm.
like you do in the book.
Well, and there she is during the presentation that Palpatine's giving in the Senate about what happened with the Jedi. And she basically is telling Bail that you have to vote to support him
Mhm.
to maintain a cover so that you can do all those things that you're talking about, because everyone that's on that list of 2000, they're in serious trouble. But what you're going to do, you have to do from undercover of being a supporter. And she says something along the lines like, I may not be around. She
Yeah, I may not
realizes
live
how
that
much,
long. Mhm.
yeah, she's basically knows that her days are likely numbered, that there's no good outcome for her. And that's the other thing. It's like, you know, Anakin is much more ahead of the final scene on Mustafar between the two of them. He's just kind of like lording over her. It's like, as you were mentioning earlier, it's like you got to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Those type of views are dangerous. And he's not really giving her a choice in this matter. And
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not even sure exactly how to phrase it, but he's like much more dictating to her and being brutal about things than he is, attempting to comfort her and just like brush off her. The gaslighting is not there as much, which it's weird to say that that's a good thing. But, in the movie, he's like, when he shows up, it's like, the Jedi rebelled. And what about Obi-Wan? I don't know. We can only hope that he's been loyal. And hey, don't worry, my love. I'm going to go put an end to this. Here it is. It's like, you're safe because I'm making you safe. And
Mhm.
it's a very different tone between from the book to the movie.
Yeah, it truly is. And it hits home the idea that she is his possession more
Hmm.
so than his partner in the book too, that he has this absolute possession over her. And they even mention that, in the book in so many ways.
Right,
So,
and it's not just her pleading with him to come back from the dark side. It's her pleading with him to be the man that she fell in love with all those years ago.
and just to
Because
leave. Yeah, just to get
yeah,
away.
I mean, yeah, he's completely become this possessive, obsessive person that is not really even listening to her anymore. Where,
Right.
when they were in having their picnic during Attack of the Clones, he had some very strong viewpoints, but he at least was listening to her in that regard. And now he's not
Right.
even like really listening to her. It's just like, I did all this to keep you safe. Now be appreciative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
W-
chilling.
Right. What did you think? We kind of gotten away from our bringing topics up and we're just free flowing discussing it. I love it. But the fact that Obi-Wan shows up that morning before everything goes bad and he basically just comes out and tells Padme that I know there's a thing between you and Anakin. He's obsessed about you ever since he met you, and I pretend not to notice it. But, for your part, Padme, every time he's mentioned, your face lights up on this.
Mhm.
And although she tries to protest a little bit, she eventually just gives up and starts saying, I can't talk about that, Obi-Wan. I can't discuss that. Please don't ask me about it. And so she's not denying it, but she's also just trying to cut off the conversation. But we all knew that Obi-Wan kind of knew, but for him, he just flat out comes out and says it to her in this situation that he's always pretended that he didn't know because he was happy for Anakin there. And so he's in a way admitting that he has an attachment to Anakin as a brother and wants Anakin to be happy in that regard.
Yeah, it's true. And I liked that in the novelization. I don't know if it would have worked as much in the movie, just only because of the fact that I think when Obi-Wan kinda sputters that out and says, "Anakin is the father, isn't he?" It's almost like a moment in the
Mhm.
movie, but it makes more sense in the novel, and even later on, when Obi-Wan is talking about how he views Anakin or viewed Anakin before he turned to Vader, and he even admits that he had an attachment to Anakin.
Mhm.
And that he feels that there were things that he couldn't see because of that attachment to Anakin. He was making excuses for Anakin. So this
Mhm.
kind of lends into that as well, kind of turning a blind eye and, all the things. And not to say that it was a bad thing for him to do because, as you said, it was something that made Obi-Wan happy to know that Anakin was happy.
Right.
And, and along those same lines, I mean, Palpatine even comes right out and says, "You really think I didn't know? Like, I'm from Naboo and I know all the
Hmm.
people that are on the clergy on Naboo. Do you really think that there was anybody that I didn't know that married you guys?" Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he comes right out and says it too.
Yeah. It occurs to me a lot of what we're talking about in this discussion is just the relationships between the characters.
Right.
And what the other thing that was kind of heartbreaking was, Anakin's had his blow up with the council. He's had a blow up with Obi-Wan here. But when Obi-Wan is leaving Coruscant to go find Grievous and defeat him, Anakin in the movie says, you're going to need me on this one, Master. And then Obi-Wan's response is like, oh, undoubtedly, but this might just be a wild bantha chase. But in the book, Anakin's inner thoughts are how much he does not want Obi-Wan to leave in
Yeah.
this situation, how much he wants Obi-Wan to be there on course there. Despite his frustrations with Obi-Wan, it's like there's a comfort there. And that as
Mhm.
long as Obi-Wan's around, that things can be better in the situation. And I mean, that just stabbed me right in the heart when I read that part of it there. Cause they really, it's not, I'm not saying it's just lip service in the movie, but they say they're brothers and they get angry and they yell at each other here. But that longing for a brother, that longing for a friend, that close to a friend, and what it means for him to leave, that he suddenly has to take on some of these frustrations by himself. They're the ones that Padme can't help with because their marriage is secret and she can't
Right.
intervene in those times. She can't use her influence like this. But his quote unquote brother is there on the council and it's been looking out for him. Whether Anakin realizes to some degree, he doesn't realize how much, but just kind of how despondent he was that Obi-Wan had to go.
Yeah, and it was heartbreaking. And
Mhm.
even to the extent too that Anakin was so much more willing to be off planet than being, just overwhelmed with everything that was going on Coruscant. Like he just wanted to get away from all of the political, doings and the manipulations and everything. He just wanted to be with Obi-Wan. He wanted to get the team back together. And, even from the very beginning of the novel, when they had that little story about, kids pretending about
Oh
Anakin,
yeah.
Skywalker and Kenobi and Skywalker and the team and who would beat who and they would never fight kind of thing. I mean, that all just, breaks your heart.
I love that portion of the book right at the
Me
beginning when they
too.
were talking about like how great these various Jedi were and their reputations. But then when there was serious business to take care of, you sent in Anakin and Obi-Wan because they were one warrior. They they accomplished anything. And when the younglings on Coruscant were watching the battle above that was raining down on the planet, while the adults were all worried, the young ones were like, "Don't worry, Anakin and Obi-Wan will be here, and they'll
Right.
take care of this." And that was such a great portion of the book. I just loved how they set up the relationship there. And when we got this movie, we didn't have the Clone Wars. We had a micro series that had
Right.
very low, but they had some Anakin and Obi-Wan in it, but not to the degree that we got through the Clone Wars.
Mhm.
And there was bickering and a lot of disagreement in Attack of the Clones. We didn't get all the adventures that these guys had had, and so getting that moment there really enhanced the relationship for those two.
Oh, it truly did. And
Mhm.
and as for much as, we've been talking about the relationships and everything, and we always talk about Anakin's downfall and tragedy between he and Padme. Poor Obi-Wan. I mean, he
Yeah.
emotionally through this entire movie has been pulled in so many different directions. And even just the fact that he is so steadfast in his beliefs as a Jedi, and he is able to mentally and emotionally pull himself out from the deepest of depths and just his strength mentally and physically and emotionally is just incredible when you read that in this novel. And I just think it does a great service to his character. And Matt Stover did a great job with that.
Hmm. Hmm. So changing gears here because there's other things about this book I want to talk about. Count Dooku in this one. He's not in the book a ton because he doesn't make it out of the first act here. But I love the way they set him up to be betrayed in this
Hmm.
book. He shows up, and there's this plan. And one, it reveals that Palpatine is Sidious right off the bat there, because we know that Palpatine's been captured and he's been put in this chair, and he's, and he's the bait for all of this. And Count Dooku is talking to Sidious, and then it reveals that that's Palpatine right off the bat. But the plan is that they're going to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that's going to be used to drive Anakin over the edge. And Dooku's not even considering a rule of two. He's envisioning a Sith order that rises
Yes.
up to take place of the Jedi, and he's like the head of a Sith academy when it comes down to it. And he makes the argument that we'd be better off if we killed Anakin and used that and took one more stab at recruiting Obi-Wan. And there he goes so far, it's like, he's practically my grandson, because he trained Qui-Gon and Qui-Gon trained Obi-Wan there. And he, the plan is that, he's going to kill Obi-Wan. Anakin's going to capture him. He's going to ride out the rest of the war in the cell. But when the dust is settled, the Jedi have fallen, he'll emerge as someone who helps broker the new arrangement between the Republic and the Confederacy. And he sincerely believes in all this. So when finally Palpatine betrays him, it's just like, wait, what?
Right.
His reaction in the book just is so classic. It's wonderful.
And he is so disillusioned because, as
Mhm.
you said, he has no idea that there is this rule of two in terms of, he knows the master and the apprentice, whatever. But I mean, it's in his mind, he's going back to, again, the influence of legends, as you said, a grand army of the Sith. Absolutely not anything what the plan is. And so I
Mhm.
love the fact that when we get this in the book and you get that inner dialogue of Dooku and what's happening, he truly is flabbergasted. Even
Yeah.
down to the point, even when he's fighting Anakin and Obi-Wan and they're talking about the different lightsaber styles. Love this part.
Oh,
And
yes.
he's realizing that Obi-Wan is a master of like basically everything.
Mhm.
And then he realizes that he's losing this fight. All of that inner dialogue, absolutely loved it. And so it makes his demise at the hands of Anakin even more shocking in a lot of ways, which is
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah, I so wanted to talk about that too, where, he's having his way with Anakin and Obi-Wan, and then he says something along the lines like, you guys are disappointing, or like, I expected better. And Obi-Wan's like, very well then. And then they like bust it out into alternative forms. And every time he got one out of the way, he's like, he turns around almost expecting to gloat, and then there's the other one in his face all of a
Right.
sudden. And he's like, what is happening here? This
Yeah.
is not this is not what I was expecting at all. And so he kind of has to up his plan on this, which is like, I got to do something about Obi-Wan faster. And so I, I really enjoyed that portion of the book as well, and it comes right on the heels of what we're just talking about how hearing what a great team Anakin and Obi-Wan were. And then they
Mhm.
put it into practice here in this big duel with Dooku.
Right, right. And and you see it on screen, but you don't
Mhm.
appreciate the what and the how. You just appreciate this is how it happened kind of thing.
Indeed, indeed. What else? What else stood out to you?
Oh gosh, so many different things. What do I want to go with next? Well, let's get into even with Grievous and how his evolution was and the way that they explained it and how his body and his, vocoder and all of those kinds of things and the reason why they chose the Durasteel or what however his skeleton was and his place in all of it. And I
Mhm.
just thought that it was, again, this is how it is to be Grievous kind of thing. And he truly believed that he was going to have a place in all of this as well. And he didn't believe that he was just being a pawn. And so, it's almost in some ways very tragic in that way too, because he was just being used as a tool in a very brutal one. But I just thought that that was really awesome the way that they handled that and the fight between he and Obi-Wan as well. I thought that they treated that or Matthew Stover treated that so well in the novel.
Yeah, I thought Grievous really got his due, and I hate to keep picking on the movie in this regard that Grievous's reputation wasn't earned as the Jedi killer because we really got to see him run away from Anakin and Obi-Wan in the movie, and then later he started fighting Obi-Wan and then ran away again. But here, they spent time talking about him, about where his lightsabers came from. That these weren't lightsabers that were given to him; these are lightsabers he's taken from Jedi that he's personally killed.
Yes.
And they really spend some time making him something fair. He is violent beyond all belief. They're the Nymodian officers on the bridge. The one says something he doesn't like, so he smashes its skull and then is flicking the brains off of
Yes.
his fist later. I was just like, that was a bit much. There's no way they could have done that in the movie. That certainly would not have happened. And we get a couple things like that from him throughout the book, which it enhances reputation. But like I said, that never could have made it onto the screen there.
Oh, for sure.
But I did like his treatment in this book. It made him much more fearsome, and he was such a pawn in all of this. You
Mhm.
know that in the movie a little bit, but the whole I love the passage that Stover put in there about setting a trap for a Jedi. You would send him to find someone on a planet in a pit that essentially you could put a lid on. He can't get out of it. And then, oh, by the way, the bait is also the person you want to kill him. And if the bait happens to die, that's no big deal because that person needs to die anyway. It
Yeah.
was really cleverly written about the trap that's being set for Obi-Wan in that regard to take out Grievous. And just who is going to determine where Grievous is between Chancellor's clone intelligence and the Jedi being frustrated, like, what do you mean clone intelligence? The clones work for us. That's our intelligence. Why didn't we know about that type of thing? Just ratcheting up the tension by the fact that Grievous exists, and whoever can bring about his downfall, and the way they do it really determines the outcome of not just the war, but what happens to the Republic. Uh, it added such another dimension to the book that I was not expecting, and really was quite fantastic.
Oh, for sure. Because in the movie, Grievous is fun to watch, but he's kind of shallow, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, he's just kind of he's just more spectacle than anything else. But you really, as you said, in this novelization, you see how his humanity was taken from him piece by piece to the point where they even talk about he loses all emotion. Like he is void of emotion whatsoever because he's given that up to become this killing machine, essentially.
Mhm.
And the novel just makes him so much more meaningful, I
Oh,
think, in
definitely.
so many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's hit a few other points before we wrap this up. One of the things that is notably absent in this book is Kashyyyk.
Mhm.
Yoda goes there, Yoda leaves there, but there are no scenes on Kashyyyk at all.
Right.
And it was a key location. And then how'd you feel about that?
In the book, I guess because we got it in the novel, I didn't miss it quite as much because I'm honestly not sure how you would. I mean, I guess Matthew Stover did a great job of explaining a lot of the other battles and action scenes, obviously. But, even to that point, the battle on Mustafar did not take up very many pages in terms of what you saw on screen. So I guess in from the novelization standpoint, did we really need to have that much exposition in the pages on, Wookiees roaring and spider droids coming out of the water and, and. I think it was a better representation in the movie. So I didn't really miss it, quite honestly.
Fair. I think my feeling on the subject is simply this: is that one of the best things about Star Wars is all the world building it does, and how it keeps creating this diverse galaxy. And Kashyyyk is where Chewbacca comes from. We know that, and so yes, we have the movie to fall back on. But when you remove it, it's removing one more environment from the story, and so I did kind of miss it in that regard because the way that Stover goes about describing so many things, I think it would have been really cool to hear what he had to say about Kashyyyk and the way he described it. I read an interview way back when, years ago, after this book came out, where he was, and I don't remember the exact quote, but one of the things he was afraid of is that he basically admitted Kashyyyk, and he was afraid George Lucas was going to be mad about it. But the reason
Uh-huh.
why he admitted it is because he wanted to concentrate on the story of Anakin, and
Mhm.
by spending time on Kashyyyk when it didn't feature Obi-Wan and the prime players that you've been talking about a lot, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme, and the like, then it diverted from that story too much. And let's face it, this book is over 400 pages. So how much did you want to add to it
Right.
already? But that's just, I still missed it. Kashyyyk is a really cool planet, and I would like to have gotten just a little bit more of it, but I get it why it wasn't there.
Mhm. And while we're on the subject of things that were omitted that we kind of missed, I will say that the Order 66 montage,
Yeah.
where, we went across the galaxy and we got to see some of the different Jedi being betrayed, I kind of did miss that. It was
Yeah.
just sort of like, oh yeah, Jedi are dying. Like the Jedi are,
It was a
here's Jedi
paragraph.
dying. And yeah, that was it. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
did
I
miss
mean, basically
that.
said, like, on my Jito, Felucia, and whatever, this happened. And Ayla Secura is not in this book.
Right. Not at all.
Yeah, despite the fact that she shows up in some key scenes, including Order
Hmm.
66, but she's not there. And to be fair, I suspect Stover wrote this before those type of decisions were really made. Because she doesn't have to be mentioned in the script because she doesn't have any lines of dialogue. Where like
It's
the
true.
other Jedi that are present in scenes typically have dialogue. So I could
Hmm.
see why she was left out, but still, I mean, she is a fan favorite character. I mean, you could have included with the line if you knew she was supposed to be around.
True.
Yeah.
And one thing that I thought was interesting that was in the book that we don't get in the movie is, again, we talk about the inner workings of what's going on with some of the characters or even things that are said. When Mace takes his Jedi masters to go face off against Palpatine, I think it's Kit Fisto that keeps saying, "I wish Yoda was here. Why isn't Yoda
Yeah.
with us?" Like, what?
Uh-huh.
I'd really sure would feel better if Yoda was
Mhm.
here. I mean, come on, Mace, wouldn't that be your first inclination that, maybe you shouldn't be taking Master Fisto with you? Maybe you should take Anakin with you instead.
Well,
It's
that's
like,
the other thing that you brought that up. It's like how much the chosen one, we were just talking about Grievous being a pawn. The whole notion of the chosen one was a pawn in this book, right? Because it was
oh yeah,
it's like, do we use the chosen one or not? And then it came down to the end, like you were just talking about, which was we're going to go arrest the Sith Lord, but we're not taking the chosen one. Well, wait a minute. Isn't the chosen one the guy that's supposed to bring balance to the force? So
exactly.
why don't we bring him? Because we don't trust him. What are we doing in this situation here?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially because Mace says, or they allude to this, that the one thing that he loves the most is the Republic.
Hmm.
And, he doesn't wanna see the Republic fall. And so when you're hearing one of your masters say these kinds of things, wouldn't you do everything and anything that you could to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah. Yeah. But I appreciate Sidious slash Palpatine has created so much confusion by giving Anakin enough reason to doubt things, but then springing on Anakin that he's the Sith Lord and knowing that the Jedi are going to have to act with that. But there is this, because of the position he's put Anakin in as being his personal representative, they aren't going to trust Anakin and let him come along, but Anakin's going to show up anyway.
Mhm.
It's a good plan in the movie, but it's even more masterful in the novel.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. And
yeah.
even Mace is so grateful when he realizes, "Oh, the chosen one is here." When he
Uh-huh.
goes, he loses his other masters. He's like, he'll step in. It'll be fine now. He realizes that he's here, and then obviously doesn't turn out the way he expects. But oof.
Indeed. Indeed. So we need to start wrapping this up because this has been plenty long. But the last question I'll have for you is, and this is not even a fair question. So I guess I'll just let you opine on however you want. But you've got the movie, you've got the book. Do you think the book is in any way superior to the movie? Is it a superior experience? Is the movie still the superior experience? What do you think? I mean, again, it's not a fair question, but if someone's putting a gun to your head, making you choose, what are you saying?
Well, of course, I'll choose the movie every time because, of course, you get the beautiful music and you get the visualization and you get to see all of these things play out and you get to see the world building and that type of thing. But, the book really does a great job. I mean, I guess in short, if I wanted to put it into perspective, the movie shows you the galaxy falling apart around the characters,
Hmm.
and the novel shows you the soul falling apart
Yeah,
within the galaxy. You know what
well
I
put.
mean?
Well put.
And so that for me is what I love about the novel. As we said, we've focused so much time on the characters in the book. And there's a reason. I mean, that's the reason right there. It's showing the soul falling apart in the galaxy. So, but yeah, I would choose the movie over the book, I think, every time for the
Yeah.
reasons that I mentioned. But what about you?
No, I agree. You brought some outstanding points, and I hadn't thought of it the way you did, and you put it very artfully with the soul falling apart. I- Here's the question I have not been able to answer myself. The book is good, don't get me wrong, but is it as great as I think it is if I hadn't seen the movie first? And I think it's kind of what you're alluding to is like when you've seen the movie, you've heard the music, you've seen the visuals. And I'm not saying that Stover does a bad job describing this, but one of the things like when we read the High Republic that we were saying is like we really need the visual guide, that
Mhm,
so we can
mhm.
see what all these things like we need to know. We don't have images of these yet on Wikipedia. Here's to look up. And so the book benefits from the movie having already come out, I think, to a certain degree.
Yes.
But it's at its core, it's the same story. The book is a fantastic supplement to the movie. I think that's the way to answer this question. It's
Mhm.
it's a good book. I think it's great for Star Wars fans. But I really feel like for it to achieve everything it does, you have to have a familiarity with the movie first. And
Yes.
but it's still a worthy read in its own right.
Absolutely. Well put.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That was fun. I'm glad we got to discuss that. I made sure that I used what time I had to get that book reread done, and I'm glad I did. Like I said, it may have been 20 years since I read it last. I can't remember, but it was fun to go through it again.
Oh, so good. So good.
Indeed. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Um, we'll be, of course, doing another novelization sometime next year when we get around to reviewing our next movie for the year. But stay tuned to find out what that'll be. And if you've enjoyed this discussion, you want to hear what we have to say about other books and novels set in the Star Wars universe, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and you'll get those as they come out. We cover several books over the course of the year, just about as many as anybody for that matter.
Mhm.
And while you're at it, once you've subscribed, we'd greatly appreciate your ratings and reviews. Those do help the show grow and get the podcast in front of more people. And if you want to find more of what we've done, the best place you can do that is over at retrozapp.com, where all previous 960 episodes can be found. So, Jay, people might want to reach out to us. Where can they do that?
Oh, and we would love it if they did. So we can be found very easily at Podcast Stardust on all the socials, including Facebook and Instagram. And we also maintain our Pinterest boards with all kinds of fun ideas for everything Star Wars. So head on over there and check that out. And then we also have our two YouTube outlets. So the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, share those out. Let us know what you thought of the novelization if you've read it and any thoughts that you might have. And we're also on all of your other streaming platforms as well. So you can catch us on Spotify and Audible and everywhere in between. And if you have some thoughts to send us or any questions, we would love it if you would drop us a line at our email address, which is podcaststardust@gmail.com. And we'd love to have just some general questions from you as well. Dennis did a great listener question episode not too long ago, and we'd love to do another one. So when we get enough to put them together in another episode, we will definitely do that. And then we also have our TeePublic store where you can pick up some Podcast Stardust merch. So if you need a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, a tank top, a tote bag, a baby onesie, or the like, you can head over to TeePublic and pick up one of those. And the link to those will be in our show notes.
All right, upcoming on the show Friday, we'll be ending the week with a look at some recent Star Wars news. On Monday, we're beginning our discussion of Star Wars Visions Volume 3 with a look at the first episode, which is called The Duel. So we're excited for that. Make sure you stick around and join us for it. Okay, that'll do it for episode 961 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.